The message from my father appeared on my screen just as I was finishing a report. I disown you. Contact my lawyer. I stared at it for a moment, waiting to feel something sharp or devastating. Instead, I typed back, all right. Then I closed my laptop gently, almost with relief, as if I had been waiting years for this exact moment. Anyone watching would have no idea what had finally pushed us to this point. I grew up being told I was independent, but in my family that word didn't mean strong, it meant overlooked. It meant forgotten. It meant I was the child who didn't need anything because giving me anything had never been the priority. Lance, on the other hand, was treated like some destined prodigy. My father bragged about his potential, and Veronica treated him like a long-term investment that would one day pay off. He could fail a class, forget responsibilities, even lie about where he'd been, and somehow it only made him more creative. If I asked for help, I was told, "You'll figure it out, Riley. You always do." If Lance asked for anything, he got it by dinner. When middle school came around, Lance was enrolled in a private academy with a robotics program my parents loved to brag about. I stayed in public school and listened to my mother say, "It's better for you, you're practical." When I begged to join the same summer enrichment programs he got, I was told we didn't have the money. But somehow there was always money for Lance's camps, tutors, and gear. By 16, the divide was impossible to ignore. On Lance's birthday, he walked outside to find a silver sports car with a massive bow on top. He screamed, hugged everyone, took pictures. 2 months later, I bought my first car by working weekend shifts at a grocery store and saving every dollar in an envelope taped under my bed. My father smiled and said, "Good. Building character will help you." Lance was the dreamer, I was the grounded one. Lance had potential, I was too realistic to be exciting. Lance was nurtured, I was tolerated. Despite everything, I convinced myself that family imbalance was normal. When Dad injured his knee and needed physical therapy, I covered the bills he couldn't afford. When Veronica claimed she'd been scammed on her credit card and needed just a little help, I paid the balance. When Lance racked up crypto debt and 2 failed startup loans, my parents pleaded, "He just needs one more chance, Riley. He'll make it big." I transferred money. I stepped in. I filled the gaps. Every single time. And I justified it with the same naive reasoning. This is what family does. This is my responsibility. They'd do the same for me. But they wouldn't. Deep down, I think I always knew that. The first real shift happened 2 years ago. Suddenly, my father stopped calling unless he needed something. Veronica became oddly formal, speaking to me like a distant acquaintance. Lance, normally overflowing with self-important updates, barely texted. It felt like I'd been quietly demoted from family member to bank account, and I was too busy working, too exhausted from carrying the people who refused to carry themselves, to notice the pattern clearly. Until the video. That changed everything. It arrived on a random Tuesday night, sent by Uncle Drew, a man my father always dismissed as dramatic, but who had never once lied to me. His message only said, "You deserve to know the truth." The video was from a family gathering I hadn't been invited to. My father was standing in the kitchen, beer in hand, surrounded by Veronica, Lance, and a few cousins. They were laughing, really laughing, the kind of laughter people share when they feel completely safe. And then my father raised his drink. "A toast," he said. "To our personal ATM." My name was never spoken, but everyone knew who he meant. Veronica giggled. "Poor girl thinks she's buying our approval." Lance added, "It works out. Desperate people are generous." They clinked glasses. They toasted. They celebrated my gullibility as if it were a joke I had willingly chosen to participate in. I watched the video 3 times. By the third, my hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from clarity. In that moment, I understood something I had avoided acknowledging for years. I was never truly part of the family. I wasn't loved. I wasn't appreciated. I wasn't even seen. I was a resource. A wallet with legs. A problem solver they could drain without apology. And that realization, as painful as it was, became the beginning of my revenge. Not the destructive kind, but the kind that starts with finally seeing the truth. The day after watching that video, I drove to my parents' house with a heaviness sitting in my stomach like a stone. I didn't go there angry, I went there needing an explanation, some shred of humanity to cling to. When my father opened the door, he looked surprised, as if seeing me without a checkbook in hand confused him. I didn't waste time. "Dad," I said, "I saw a video. From the family gathering. You made a toast, about me." His face twitched, but he recovered quickly. "Riley, you must have misunderstood." "No," I said quietly, "I didn't." Veronica appeared behind him, arms crossed, smile tight. "Oh, sweetheart, that was just a joke. You're being dramatic." I stared at her. "You called me desperate." "You laughed." She shrugged, almost bored. "People joke. You're too sensitive. Don't twist things." Dad added, "You remember things wrong all the time. You always have." That sentence, the gaslighter's anthem, hit like a punch. I realized then they weren't shocked I knew. They were shocked I dared to bring it up. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Lance. A text popped up on the screen. "You owe this family more than you think. Your success exists because we supported you. Don't act like you're better." I actually laughed. Supported? When? The entitlement was staggering. That night, I went home and opened my banking app. Every automatic payment, my father's therapy bills, Veronica's credit card, Lance's loan installments, I canceled them all with a single breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Within minutes, the calls began. Veronica first. "What did you do?" "My card was declined at the store." "Do you know how humiliating?" I hung up. Then Lance. "You can't just cut me off. I have deadlines. Investors. People counting on." I hung up again. My father was last. He didn't yell. He sighed dramatically, the way he used to when I didn't do chores fast enough. "I am deeply disappointed, Riley. You've wounded this family." That was the moment something in me cracked, but not the way they expected. Not with guilt. With clarity. The next morning, just as I sat down at my desk to start work, a message popped up from Dad. "Beau tu con. Noiche envoie su quoi beau. I disown you. Talk to my lawyer." No explanation. No attempt to understand why I had stopped paying for their lives. No introspection. Just removal. I waited to see if fear would hit me. If heartbreak would choke me. But all I felt was a strange, steady calm, like a fog lifting after years of breathing through it. By noon, the rest of the family had joined the chorus. Aunt Lila calling me ungrateful. A cousin posting on Facebook about kids who forget who raised them. Veronica's niece sending a long paragraph about honoring your elders. I turned my phone off. Not in anger, just done. It was the first time in my life I didn't defend myself. Didn't justify. Didn't explain. For the first time, I simply watched the truth move through me without resistance. They weren't upset I stopped helping. They were upset I stopped being useful. And realizing that, finally, felt like stepping out of a burning house and realizing the world outside was quiet, cool, and survivable. I wasn't losing anything. I was seeing everything. Elena was the first person I told after the Disown text. We sat in the quiet corner of a cafe near our office, my hands wrapped around a cup I hadn't actually sipped from. I showed her the messages, the video, the accusations. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening the longer I spoke. When I finally finished, she leaned back, exhaled, and said the sentence no one in my family had ever had the courage, or decency, to say out loud. They don't need you, Riley. They need your wallet. The simplicity of it made my chest tighten. Not because it hurt, because it was the clearest truth I had ever heard. She continued, "You've spent your entire adult life fixing their fires. You think that counts as love. But to them, it's a service." Her words didn't feel cruel. They felt like someone finally turning the lights on. At her insistence, I hired Mr. Blake, a real attorney with a reputation for being relentless. I walked into his office with a folder of bank statements, texts, screenshots, and a shaky understanding of what I was even asking. He flipped through everything with a calm expression, occasionally lifting an eyebrow. "Let me run a full check," he said. "Given what you've described, there might be more underneath." I expected to wait days. It took him 6 hours. He called me that same evening, voice low and steady. "Riley, your father has been moving money from the community fund he oversees. Thousands. Some months, tens of thousands." I felt my stomach drop. "And," he continued, "those funds were transferred into accounts belonging to Veronica, occasionally Lance. The pattern is consistent." I sat down on the floor of my apartment and pressed a hand to my chest, not from panic but from a sudden, overwhelming clarity. It wasn't just emotional manipulation. It wasn't just taking advantage of my reliability. They were committing actual financial abuse, of me, and of an entire community. After the call, I opened my laptop and pulled up my own transaction history. For hours, I scrolled through 10 years of payments, medical bills, overdraft fees, urgent loans, cash transfers disguised as family emergencies. I added everything up, line by line, until the total formed a number so high I had to start over twice just to be sure my eyes weren't tricking me. What I had given them, willingly, blindly, was the size of a retirement fund. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Why they adored Lance's failures. Why my stability was treated like a duty. Why I was expected to finance their fantasies without question. It was never love. It was infrastructure. Then came their final move. A letter arrived in my mailbox, supposedly from an attorney representing Veronica. It demanded I reimburse the family for the cost of raising me, claiming they were entitled to a percentage of my income for past parental support. I read it once. Then again. The formatting was sloppy. The legal terminology was inconsistent. The letterhead was something Veronica could have designed in 5 minutes on Canva. I actually laughed. They weren't even hiding the manipulation anymore, they were insulting my intelligence. When I showed the letter to Mr. Blake, he didn't even look surprised. He just said, "That's fraud." Plain and simple. And somewhere between the forged letter, the stolen community funds, and the decade of financial drain, a switch flipped inside me. For years, they called me dramatic, sensitive, overreacting. For years, I bent myself into smaller and smaller shapes trying to keep the peace. But now I could see the pattern with perfect clarity. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't wrong. I was being used. Systematically. Deliberately. And I finally had the proof. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel confused or guilty. I felt steady. I stood up, closed the fake legal letter, and said out loud, to no one but myself, "This ends now." And I meant it. I scheduled the meeting on a Sunday afternoon, choosing the conference room at Mr. Blake's office so no one could twist the environment to their advantage. When Thomas, Veronica, and Lance walked in, they looked irritated, like I had inconvenienced them. Mr. Blake sat beside me, calm and unreadable, while I folded my hands on the table and waited for everyone to settle. Thomas started first. "Riley, this whole thing is unnecessary. You could have just talked to us like family." I met his eyes. "That's what I'm doing." I tapped my tablet and projected the first file onto the screen, the video from the family gathering. Thomas froze mid-sentence as the room filled with the sound of him toasting to our personal ATM. Veronica's laughter echoed, bright and sharp. Lance's voice calling me desperate rang louder than I remembered. No one spoke. Even Mr. Blake leaned back, giving them room to absorb their own ugliness. I clicked again. The second file appeared: spreadsheets, bank statements, transfers. "Here," I said evenly, "are the withdrawals from the community fund. And here are the deposits into Veronica's and Lance's accounts." Repeated for months. Veronica gasped, covering her mouth, eyes watering. "Riley, I didn't know what Thomas was doing. He handled everything. I was just—" "Save it," I said, not raising my voice. "The statements have your signature." Click. The third document, a compiled list of every payment I had made over the past 10 years. Medical bills. Credit card balances. Loans. Bailouts. Transfers. Emergencies fabricated or exaggerated. The total number at the bottom glowed on the screen like a wound. Lance shot to his feet. "I didn't ask for all of that. Dad told me you wanted to help. This isn't on me." Veronica pointed at Thomas. "You told me she offered. You said she wanted to be part of things." Thomas slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. This is what family does. We sacrifice for each other, but you," he jabbed a finger at me, "you hoard your money and pretend you're superior. You should be ashamed." I looked him dead in the eye. "Ashamed? I'm done being ashamed of being responsible while the rest of you burn everything you touch. I am not the villain because I stopped funding your disasters." His face reddened. "You are selfish. Family comes first. You owe us." "No," I cut him off. "I don't owe any of you anything. I have never owed you anything. And I won't carry responsibility for the stupidity or dishonesty of anyone in this room." Veronica burst into tears. Lance muttered that everything was unfair. But Thomas snapped. He lunged forward and slapped me across the face. Hard. The room went silent. I didn't flinch the second time. I just reached for my phone, pressed one button, and said, "Hello, I'd like to report an assault." Thomas's expression changed from rage to panic as the officers arrived minutes later, ushering him and Veronica outside while they stammered excuses. Veronica wailed that it was a misunderstanding. Thomas insisted I was overreacting, but the handprint on my cheek said otherwise. Lance stood frozen, pale, silent, watching the only script he had ever known disintegrate before his eyes. I gathered my documents calmly, slipped them into my bag, and stood. "You chose this," I told them, not angry, not triumphant, just finally free. "Whatever happens next is on you." Then I walked out of the room. I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I didn't look back. And for the first time in my life, my steps felt like they belonged solely to me. the fallout came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, the community board launched a full investigation into the missing funds. Thomas tried to spin it as accounting errors, but the paper trail was impossible to deny. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every deposit into Veronica's and Lance's accounts pointed directly back to him. The man who once lectured me about responsibility now had to sit across from investigators and explain why he treated a community fund like his personal wallet. Then came the second collapse. Lance's grand investment project failed spectacularly. The house my parents had secretly used as collateral was repossessed almost overnight. Their savings were gone, their credit destroyed. With nowhere else to go, they moved into my grandmother's tiny one-story home on the outskirts of town. No more private office for Veronica. No more tech toys for Lance. No more curated life for Thomas. Just 3 adults crammed into a small house with peeling wallpaper and a leaking roof. And for once, I wasn't part of the cleanup crew. I didn't offer advice. I didn't send money. I didn't even send a text asking if they were okay. Instead, I focused on rebuilding a life that finally belonged to me. The firm promoted me after reviewing how I handled the entire ordeal, methodically, transparently, without letting personal chaos derail my work. They called it exemplary crisis leadership. I called it survival. With my new salary bump, I bought a different apartment, bright, quiet, overlooking a park instead of a parking lot. It felt like the first place I'd ever lived that wasn't shadowed by someone else's problems. I filled it slowly, a plant I watered because I chose to, a painting I bought because it made me feel something, a couch I picked for comfort instead of practicality. Therapy became a weekly ritual. Not to fix anything, just to understand, to untangle the patterns I had confused with love for far too long. Elena visited often. We cooked, talked, sometimes said nothing at all. Silence felt different now. Not heavy. Not expectant. Just peaceful. I didn't hate my family. I didn't wish them harm. But I no longer felt chained to their consequences. And that was its own kind of forgiveness. Because forgiveness, I finally understood, isn't pretending the past didn't happen. It isn't excusing it. It isn't carrying it forward like a burden strapped to your back. Forgiveness is refusing to let it drag you down any farther. It's acknowledging the damage and choosing to walk away anyway. And for the first time in my life, I walked into a future that was mine alone. In the end, I learned that revenge doesn't always look dramatic or destructive. Sometimes it's simply walking away from the cycle they kept you trapped in, choosing peace over chaos, choosing yourself over the version of you they tried to shape. Family, I realized, isn't defined by blood or obligation, it's defined by respect, safety, and mutual care. And if you've ever been treated like a resource instead of a person, please know you aren't alone. Your worth isn't measured by what you can give. If this story resonated with you, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more family revenge stories that remind us we're allowed to choose better, even when it means letting go.